This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, all. Today we'll be talking about systemic sclerosis. Now, actually, from the recent classes, we are discussing about skin and association with other systems. So last time I discussed about most common conditions, and now I'm going to discuss systemic sclerosis. This is a very big topic, and you will you will come across these cases in general medicine also mostly. So all of you just make a note. I'll make it very simple, like I'll keep all the photos and pictorially I will show it to you. Too much of information will be there, but try to recollect and store them, because all these things will be given in your entrance exams. Today we'll be talking about auto antibodies, everything. So just concentrate and try to listen. So starting, scleroderma or systemic sclerosis is the same. That is harder. Scleros means harder indurated, and derma is, as you know, skin. So systemic sclerosis is a multi-system disorder characterized by association of vascular abnormalities, connective tissue sclerosis, atrophy, and systemic involvement, and most importantly, production of autoantibodies. This is one of the most important autoimmune condition of the in dermatology and also in other multi-system disorders. Systemic sclerosis is a part of connective tissue disorder. Connective tissues are nothing but collagen, elastin, etc., which are present in your skin just subcutaneously, which hold all your organs in place. So any defect in this proportion, see, every in a normal human being, collagen is to elastin is to, there is a particular proportion of these things which will constitute the normal looking appearance. But if there is any increase or decrease or extra fibrosis, then you will see all these connective tissue disorders. So one of the connective tissue disorders today we are discussing is systemic sclerosis. Clinically, scleroderma or systemic sclerosis is the same, don't get confused. Is divided into localized, that is morphia, pseudoscleroderma, systemic sclerosis, and along with other connective tissue disorders in overlap syndromes. And systemic sclerosis again is of two types: limited systemic sclerosis and diffuse. I'll be talking about each thing in detail. Don't worry, try to concentrate. And now coming to the first entity, morphia, that is localized scleroderma. Here, localized form of scleroderma is characterized by excessive collagen deposition, which leads to thickening of the dermis and subcutaneous tissues. Based on the morphology and distribution of the lesions, they are divided into block type, guttate, bullous, subcutaneous or deep. That is also called as morphia profundus, linear, frontoparietal, etc. So one picture for each one. See, this is block type, where you can see small blocks on the abdomen. In this area, you will find the changes, and the rest of the skin will be normal. This is bullous type, little severe, not very common, but can be present. You will see bullae and crusts. And this is linear, as you see in this photo, often found on the limb, and long and narrow block. But the important feature here is there is underlying contractures or limb length discrepancies. Because of this, if this appears in the childhood, this particular limb may show a contracted appearance than the other, even changing the gait of the patient. So this is very important. When you touch any morphia blocks, whenever you are examining skin condition, if and when required, we need to touch the lesion. So when you touch, first you have to touch the normal looking skin, and then slowly come towards the lesion. Then particularly in case of morphia, we will see a dip, and there will be atrophy in the affected area, and normal looking skin in the normal area. Even the feel itself will tell you the underlying condition. There will be hardening of the skin and subcutaneous tissue. And this is frontoparietal, also called as uncooked saber. Saber is nothing but one type of కొడవలి అంటారు కదా తెలుగులో. It's like that. So it is a sharp cut over like looks like a cut over the face. It's a deep seated form, affects scalp and temple like a saber cut, and hair is lost permanently, and underlying skull bone may also have a deformity. And generalized morphia, here it's very rare. Systems are not involved, but whole skin is involved. Widespread skin thickening, and over the trunk you can see this shiny atrophic taut skin in this picture. Now coming to our main topic of today, systemic sclerosis as such. Epidemiology, it's 2.3 to 10 per million cases incidence, and female is to a male ratio 3 to 6 is to 1. Any autoimmune conditions, females are most affected than males, and it peaks at a fourth decade in female, and it still later in males. Average incidence about 20 to 40 years. We generally come across 20 to 25 years. We cut the patients, and race, all races are affected, less frequent in Asians. Black women were more likely to develop diffuse disease, that too at a younger age, and survival is also decreased compared to the whites. And risk factors, coal miners, work in dusty trades, silicosis, etc. These people are at higher risk. So plaque, even in systemic sclerosis, it starts as plaque type, most common, thickened scar-like oval patches of the skin, 1 to 20 centimeters. It starts as mauve colored, which slowly over time it changes into ivory white with a lilac edge. That is important. And older lesions may be brown, smooth, shiny, and hairless surface. And there is a decreased sweating in these areas. And any criteria for any disease when we are telling multi-system disorder, multi-system condition, connective tissue disorder, any big like when you're grouping few or more in the systems of the body, there will always be a criteria where you have to meet the patient should meet at least few of these criteria to term them as a patient. So we follow for systemic sclerosis American College of Rheumatology criteria. They are 97% sensitive and 98% specific for systemic sclerosis. Major criteria is proximal diffuse truncal sclerosis. That is, sclerosis is nothing but skin tightness, thickening, and non-pitting induration. And minor criteria may include sclerodactyly, digital pitting scars or loss of substance of the digital finger pads, that is pulp loss, and bibasilar pulmonary fibrosis. For any patient who fulfills one major criteria and 2 or 3 minor criteria minimum, then only we will term them or diagnose them as systemic sclerosis patient. So coming to etiology, it's not like it is not an infection where you can pinpoint an organism. This is an autoimmune condition. Genetic predisposition should be there to start this disease, and then many etiological agents will start with the damage to the endothelium and then production of autoantibodies. I made it the pathology is very simple for you. This is very basic. See, any etiological agent, any trauma, whatever, if the patient has permissive genetic background to develop this autoimmune condition, there will be molecular and cellular alterations in target cells. What are the target cells here? Fibroblasts, endothelial cells, B cells, and T cells. Fibroblasts, this will this lead to increased fibrosis, fibrocytes production, so there will be tissue fibrosis. Endothelial cells, which will result in obliteration of small arteries and arterioles, and B cells, production of autoantibodies, and T cells, cellular infiltration of cytokine and growth factor dysregulation. So these are the target cells which are getting affected in the patients with the permissive genetic background, and these are the results of those effects. So the same thing I'm explaining here. There are the main markers of vascular damage and von Willebrand factor and endothelial adhesion molecules. These the endothelial cell is an initial target or primary dysfunction cell in these conditions. Any damage to the endothelial cell will initiate the fibrotic process, and this will cause ischemia reperfusion via platelet-derived growth factor, and then this will act upon fibroblasts and increase production of collagen in subcutaneous tissue. This collagen composition is similar as in other fibrotic disorders with a normal ratio of type 1 and type 3 collagen. This will cause the fibrosis. So I've been talking about autoimmunity from first. I think pretty much by now you people would have known what is autoimmunity. Our body defense acts against itself. That is called autoimmunity. So the autoimmune antibodies, there are specific for each autoimmune condition. In the same case, for systemic sclerosis, anti-nuclear antibodies are present in 80% of cases, anti-topoisomerase antibodies in 22%, anti-centromere antibodies in 30%. So there is a role of even endothelium injury, as I told. So anti-endothelial antibodies. But for any connective tissue disorder, first thing we do is ANA and dsDNA. dsDNA is for systemic lupus erythematosus, and once ANA is positive, then we go for more specific tests, anti-topoisomerase or centromere. So how we go for investigations, I'll be dealing later. And genetic factors I told. So what are the proof that it is a genetical predisposition? Abnormal serum immunoglobulins present in these patients, and high incidence of ANA in relatives also explains or suggests that there is genetical involvement. And HLA halotypes are also seen in pulmonary fibrosis affected patients. So systemic sclerosis as such is clinically divided into two types, limited and diffuse. See, if you see this photo, the blue colored one is affected areas in limited, that is trunk and upper thighs, upper arms are not affected, otherwise the extremities are affected. Diffuse, the whole body is affected. So limited is comparatively safer than diffuse systemic sclerosis. More than 50% have limited disease. This is more insidious and they have long history of Raynaud's phenomenon. You should know what is Raynaud's phenomenon. And swelling of the digits, lower incidence of renal involvement and restrictive pulmonary disease. Like it will be little less. It's a more benign course and much better prognosis. And here specifically after ANA, anti-centromere antibody will be positive in limited systemic sclerosis. Why is this important? Because if we know that it's a limited condition, then the patient, we can give the prognosis better. And coming to diffuse, short history, the disease will come rapidly, and they often have acral sclerosis, arthritis, Raynaud's phenomenon. They won't have a long history, just they come with those presentations, rapid progression of the skin involving the arms and trunks, higher incidence of other systems, that is renal, cardiac, pulmonary, and tendon. And anti-topoisomerase antibodies or anti-fibrillin, same thing, will be more. This is also called as URNA antibodies and anti-RNA polymerase. This is the, and one more thing, there is something called anti-RNA polymerase. All these are autoantibodies. If that is present, which is rare but worse prognosis, and anti-SCL70 antibodies are also present in diffuse systemic sclerosis. We generally, like practical purposes, we do ANA and then we do anti-SCL for our patients if we suspect systemic. So as I already told, this is a pictorial, this is a table. Same thing, diffuse, short history, limited, more benign course, and longer, more insidious, and long history of Raynaud's. Here the sudden attacks will develop. Truncal and peripheral involvement is more limited involvement, and friction rubs present, calcification and telangiectasia is present, and internal other systems more commonly involved. Here less incidence, and capillary dropouts in the nail folds. I'll be showing all this photos. Don't worry, this is the terms are little new for you. And other antibodies, as I told, anti-centromere is seen in limited. Others, ARNA and URNA, anti-topo, etc., are seen in diffuse cutaneous. And because we are talking about systemic sclerosis, we should know one of the most common variant of SSC, that is CREST syndrome, Tibig-Wissenbach syndrome. The limited, this is a limited symptoms of scleroderma as referred to as CREST. What is CREST? Calcinosis, that is calcium deposits in the skin. Raynaud's phenomenon. Esophageal dysfunction, acid reflux and decreased motility in the esophagus. Sclerodactyly, that is thickening and tightening of the skin of the fingers and hands. And telangiectasias, dilatation of capillaries causing red marks on the surface of skin. So this is crust. You should know this. This is very important for your entrance exams. I think you already came across this in your general medicine. And then coming specifically to the clinical symptoms, how do they present? See, SSC, that is systemic sclerosis, is a multi-system disease, as I've been telling. So what are all the organs which can be connective tissue, that is skin, vessel wall, GIT, cardiovascular system, lungs, and kidneys. Everything will be involved. So coming whenever you are taking clinical like examination, first we should know the history. The patient usually comes with complaints of Raynaud phenomenon, that is bluish on typical exposure to cold or cold clammy climates. There is bluish discoloration of the tips of the fingers, that is your Raynaud's phenomenon. And sclerosis of the skin, that is tightness of the skin. The patient will tell you that he's unable to pinch the skin away from his body. So like there, it's very tight and it restricts the movement of the distal phalanges. And then hyper or hypopigmentation, it depends. And microstomia, because of this tightening, the patient will be unable to open their mouth while eating. So microstomia and relative macroglossia. See, macroglossia is enlargement of the tongue, but here the problem is not the tongue, because the mouth cannot open. Relatively, they feel that their tongue has become big. So we have to elicit the history properly. And esophageal reflux is there, and dyspnea because of the pulmonary fibrosis. So these are the presenting complaints which the patient comes with. Usually it will be the tightness of the skin which comes first, and then and Raynaud's phenomenon. So earliest symptom is usually Raynaud's phenomenon. Other symptoms and signs, as I told, swelling of the hands, joints, ulceration of the fingers, whitlows, whitlows is nothing but nail involvement, and gangrenes. Very less commonly systemic symptoms, because by that time they will be coming with the earlier symptoms. And natural history of the disease, it starts with Raynaud's, and then in those also, for males it's a short duration, and females approximately 5 years or something they suffer from Raynaud's. And cutaneous changes. Occasionally, very rarely, first cutaneous changes, then Raynaud's phenomenon will be seen. So coming about Raynaud's phenomenon a little more in detail. Episodic digital ischemia provoked by cold or emotion is called Raynaud's phenomenon. There are 3 phases, that is pallor, cyanosis, and rubor. Pallor is due to vasospasm. Cyanosis is due to ischemia, that is reduced oxygen content. And rubor is due to reactive hyperemia. Observed in 3 to 4% of general population, being a transient condition in 20 to 30% of young women also. So in this picture, you can see first pallor. Then here you can see bluish discoloration of in a female. You can see here also same different picture. And then arteriogram we do, because to know why. See, as I told, why do these changes occur? Because of the endothelial cell damage, there will be obliteration of the peripheral arterioles. That's why there will be lack of during generally also during cold conditions. You know, our body, the vessels, they start constricting, so that they'll withhold the heat getting away from outside. So the same process, but in these people, what happens? The arteries are already very narrow, and again, if they start constricting, there will be there will be no circulation for the distal proximities. So that's why they will have this hypoxic changes. So you can see in this picture, in arteriogram, beyond a point, there is no blood supply. Narrowing and occlusion of digital arteries, proximal vessels, arcades, and metacarpals are widely patent. So these are normal, but here suddenly there is occlusion. So sclerosis of the skin can appear in two forms. First, it can start in the acral areas, and then it can go to face, trunk, and axis progressively, or it can start in the trunk first, and very aggressively it can involve the whole body. So it can be either ways. So skin sclerosis, our most common and dermatological aspect of systemic sclerosis. There are three phases. One is edematous phase. Initially, there will be stiff, puffy fingers, and then indurative phase, that is hard, tight, hidebound skin, and then atrophic phase, softened skin, burned out. The skin will be normal, but it's like completely burned out, atrophy. You won't have any underlying subcutaneous tissue. Based on this phase only, even if you do a histopathology, you see different variations in systemic sclerosis. So if you take a biopsy specimen in the atrophic phase, you won't see subcutaneous tissue, only you will see collagen. And based on the phase, you see the changes in your histopathology also. So you should know this. So now, even if you didn't hear till now, if you see these pictures, at least I think you'll get an idea. Because of the tightness of the skin in this patient, you can see the patient is trying to frown, but loss of forehead lines, macrostomia, pinching of the nose, and here loss of here tightness of this loss of nasolabial folds, and matty telangiectasia here, but you can't see in this picture very clearly. Telangiectasias are nothing but dilated vessels located just beneath the dermis. And most obviously, we can see them on the face and perioral area and hands and anterior chest. And then, as I told, hypo or hyper salt and pepper pigmentation, you can see some hyper at places, hypo at places. So this patient came in early, maybe that's why you can see the swelling of puffiness of the fingers. And these are stellate scars. You can see stellate wherever it comes, it's like star, like multiple branching, that is you can see here. And then pitted scars on the toes, nail fold capillaries, you can see here below the nail folds. So for normal eye, you can't see abnormality as such, but with dermoscopic lens and all, we can see the loops also. See, this is a picture with the dermoscope taken, that is a magnification up to 30x. See the dilated loops and curved loops, these are normal. But here in systemic sclerosis, you can see how their fallout is seen, broken. There is no particular definition for this arterioles here. Capillary dropouts, that is the name given for this particular picture. And then, as I told, loss of fingertips because of the loss of like ischemia and resorption of the bone tips. And then now coming to other systems, internal organ involvement. First, coming to GIT, esophagus is most frequent part, involved in more than 75%, in almost equal to 75% of cases. They complain of dysphagia and phagodynia, that is painful swallowing, and hypomotility, reflux, peptic esophagitis, Barrett's metaplasia, and fibrotic strictures. So conventional radiobarium swallow we can do. Stiff glass tube appearance of esophagus, and manometric measurements are taken, and scintigraphic procedures are also done, which are quantitative and non-invasive. But generally we do barium swallow, which will clearly show the stiff glass tube appearance in our X-ray. See, this is that picture. And this is watermelon stomach, and this is duodenum. I'll be showing you. Wide mouth diverticuli in the large on the colon. So stomach delayed gastric emptying due to peristaltic abnormalities results in the watermelon stomach, as I showed in this picture, this one. And small and large intestine, decreased peristaltic movements that cause pseudo obstruction, malabsorption, diverticulitis, stenosis, chronic obstipation, megacolon, and proctal collapse. And then barium anemia we can do if we have this diverticula, you can see colon. And then coming to liver, rarely involved in primarily in systemic sclerosis, maybe secondarily affected as sequel of right ventricular heart disease, and if present, it primary biliary cirrhosis associated. And coming to your respiratory system, interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, inflammatory alveolitis, pulmonary hypertension, either alone or in combination can be seen. This is also one of, as I told, pulmonary fibrosis is one of the minor criteria to diagnose. So these are very common. So you can see in the lower zones this and distal here the fibrosis. And then coming to renal, kidney involvement may be subtle, such as a slow rise in creatinine levels. Slowly progressive vasculitis can be seen. If present, intimal proliferation, medial thinning, adventitious fibrosis with decreased blood flow and glomerular function. Here also you can see in arteriogram, this is normal, but this here you can see that the arterioles are little constricted and the occlusion is present. And then coming to your cardiovascular system, resting ECG is normal in almost 50% of cases, but rhythm anomalies can occur. Most commonly, paroxysmal atrial tachycardia, atrial fibrillation and flutter, bifid P waves, T wave changes, and ventricular tachycardia. Muscular involvement, proximal muscle weakness can be seen, which is difficult to distinguish from dermatomyositis. Dermatomyositis is nothing but in other connective tissue disorders when muscles are more involved and CPK levels are elevated. Electromyogram is abnormal in 50% of cases. Histopathological changes are seen in 40%. And then tendon rubs, this is also important. Leathery, palpable, audible friction rubs over limbs and tendons is seen up to 25%. Arthritis may be present, joint involvement. And dental changes, widening of periodontal membrane because of the fibrosis is seen. See, this is the periodontal ligament and membrane here. This widening gap may see, and you can see in this picture the gaps. And CNS rarely involved, but occasionally, if involved, thickening of the vessel wall, meningeal, lymphocytic, and granulomatous infiltrates, trigeminal neuropathy, and impotence has also been reported as an initial manifestation. And peripheral nervous system, initial increased collagen deposition in the epi and perinuria, intimal thickness, carpal tunnel, and meralgia parasitica. Eye changes because of the whatever sclerosis, tightness of the lids, decreased tear secretion, keratoconjunctivitis, Sjogren syndrome can be in overlap syndromes, they can be together. And now these are the clinical presentations, like what you should see in all the organs, like what you should suspect, because the patient doesn't come and give you like I have a heart condition, something like that, they won't come. But if you see any patient coming with sclerosis of the skin, you should it is your responsibility to go in depth about other organs, not just look it as a dermatologic condition. So once you start investigation, many major life risking symptoms like fibrosis of the lungs, all this can be seen. So if we catch, we can maintain the patient longer, better prognosis will be there. So you should have in mind that you should look for all the other organs. And then coming to differential diagnosis, Raynaud's phenomenon, Raynaud's phenomenon, other causes can be the primary Raynaud's and other systemic, other causes of Raynaud's you have to rule out. Generalized morphia and endoderm of Pacini and Perini. These are all dermatological conditions where you see fibrosis. And pigmentation can be confused with Addison's disease, and protoporphyria. Porphyrias also should be ruled out. So coming to management. So management is again, we have any case, if you have to manage two things, you have to divide it. One is investigation and one is treatment. Investigation, I'll be running quick because we have already discussed in while telling the clinical symptoms. So basic lab investigations, because of renal failure, multi-system, we have to see if there is any anemia, ESR, and increased serum gamma globulins and cold agglutinin may be seen, and microangiopathic hematologic picture may be seen in renal crisis. And then most importantly, our auto antibodies. ANA is the first thing we do, and then anti-centromere and anti-SCL70 is done. And if anti-centromere is there, there is favorable prognosis, and that is a better prognosis will be there. So same thing. These are the newer antibodies which have in recent reports which have been discovered, like anti-endothelial cell, anti-fibrillin, anti-MMPs, and anti-platelet derived growth factor antibodies are also seen in systemic sclerosis. And then coming to imaging studies, as I already told, because of the pulmonary involvement, HR-CT scan, ground glass appearance. I think you people have been hearing this ground glass appearance so much because of the COVID now. So that ground glass appearance because of the fibrosis can be seen. And first abnormality observed during the development of lung fibrosis, and replaced by honeycombing and traction bronchiectasis or bronchiectasis. And every six, even if there is no if there is any active alveolitis, every 6 months this HRCT should be repeated. So you can see the ground glass appearance here and fibrosis. And chest radiography, as I told, I showed you the picture. X-rays of extremities for calcinosis and resorption of the distal bones, and ECG. Pulmonary function test done every 6 months to know the lung capacity. And GIT, I already showed you, for barium anemia, enema and barium meals. And then histopathology, I told, based on the level of phase of the disease, you can see the homogeneous collagen present. I'll show you the better one. See, this is a normal epidermis and thickened collagen bundles, and atrophy of the glands will be seen. High power, you can see the pink thickened collagen bundles. This is a inflammatory infiltrate around the glands. See, this is there are few strains called as special strains which stain collagen. One of them is gomorrhea. The blue color one you are seeing is all collagen. So that much collagen deposition will be seen. And digital arteries occluded here, and collagen. So coming to prognosis, what are the poor prognosis factors and better prognostic factors? Males have poorer prognosis. Patients with extensive skin and visceral involvement have poor prognosis. Blacks, as I already told, have poorer prognosis. Reduction in pulmonary diffuse capacities also have, if it's greater than 60%, as 5 years survival. And calcinosis and telangiectasia don't change any prognosis. These are minor changes. Changes confined to hands, and that is only acral has better prognosis. And patients with decreased cell-mediated immunity and presence of HLA have extensive disease and poor prognosis. So 80% accuracy in mortality prediction is done by proteinuria, increased ESR, and low CO diffusion capacity in pulmonary function test. See, these three are very important. If not either of this is there, 93% survival we can assure the patient. So regularly in our OPs we do these things. Like, we can't keep on doing every 6 months everything. So we keep doing this. What are the causes of death? We have been talking about mortality. In this case, this is intercurrent infections, renal failure, respiratory failure, malignant hypertension, cardiac failure, and malignancies. These are the causes of death with patients of systemic sclerosis. So treatment, systemic sclerosis is a multi-system involvement with long-term course. Treatment is planned individually based on the symptoms which that patient presents. Basic knowledge, you have to know physiotherapy and prolonged guidance and symptomatic treatment. No specific therapy, no therapy, and can alter the course of the disease. That also you have to keep in mind. So three main things we target is vascular, immune system, and fibrosis. For Raynaud's phenomenon, light job and warm climate, work adjustment, gloves, avoidance of smoking, those things we have to tell. And drugs, vasodilators, and prazosin 1 mg TID reduces frequency and severity. And prostacyclin analog like iloprost can be given 2.5 to 10 nanograms per kg per minute over 72 hours. IV low molecular weight dextran, pentoxifylline, all these are for your if the patient complains with Raynaud's phenomenon. And then coming to immune therapy. See, immune therapy, this is an autoimmune condition. So if you suppress our basic cell mediated immunity, then the progression of the disease is slow. So we can use few immune therapies here, but we should be very careful that we shouldn't suppress the immunity totally, that other infections, as I told, that is the main cause of death. Other infections may come in sepsis patient may go. So whenever you are giving immune therapy, in any case you should be very careful, specifically in autoimmune conditions. So before starting immune therapy, we should know the disease activity, staging of the disease, and extents of involvement. So there, as I told, there is a score called modified Rodnan score. See, very simple, 17 areas of body. The body is divided. You can see in this. So 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3 points are given. 0, 1, 2, 3, mild thickness, moderate thickness, and severe thickness. 51, like if 3 in all areas, then 51. So based on this, we score. And then the role of, so if the score is above like 20, 20, like 10, 20, then we have to go for immune therapy. Role of corticosteroids. So first thing which comes to mind when immune therapy is steroids, corticosteroids. So low doses corticosteroids can be started. This is given only to reduce articular symptoms and feeling of well-being for the patient. They do not stop or retard the progression of the disease. But there is one more modality in corticosteroids, that is DCP pulse. So here this improves significant skin fibrosis and visceral involvement. The schedule is like this. Day 1, we give 500 milligrams of cyclophosphamide with 100 milligrams of dexamethasone in 500 ml of 5% dextrose saline. We have to give infusion slowly over 2 to 3 hours. And then day 2 and 3, only dexamethasone. So in this is called one pulse. Based on the patient recovery, we have to give like pulses every 1 month. Like how many pulses depends upon the recovery of the patient. This will be given only in the hospitals with the regular monitoring of BP, temperature, every other the sugars, etc. And then other drugs which can be given, penicillamine, but we don't give very commonly. Isotretinoin, nowadays we are giving more, 1 mg per kg, that is retinoids. Methotrexate, 15 milligrams per week. Low dose intravenous cyclophosphamide, thalidomide, azathioprine, all these are immunosuppressants we can give and try. But best thing we give is corticosteroids only, that to pulse therapies. And then, as I told, other systems involvement. So if there is hypertension, ACE inhibitors, like for that hypertension, if the patient is already on treatment, we can give that. And then renal failure, we have to hemodialysis and transplant. And GERD, proton pump blockers, H2 blockers, etc. Lung diffusion, defects, breathing exercises, antibiotics for infection. And pulmonary hypertension, endothelin antagonists like bosentan and sitaxanthin, pulmonary vasodilators. If calcinosis cutis, that is calcium deposition, excision of the ulcers. And for perioral tightening, facial tightening, topical tretinoin we can give just for symptomatic relief. And for morphia, that is tightness, we can give topical steroids, calcipotriol, tacrolimus. And systemic therapy for the tightness, steroids, penicillamine, and the cyclosporin can be tried. PUVA therapy, photoradiation can also be given. See, everything is based, the main point is here, symptomatic treatment, target treatment, and the duration of the treatment depends upon the patient's recovery and the requirement of the treatment also. So before, so completely first you have to analyze the patient, investigate the patient. You should know what and all the patient are having, which organs are involved. Based on that, you have to give the treatment. It is not that you give an antibiotic for 5 days and it's reduced like that. So this is a little extensively involvement of the clinical examination and investigations. Based on that only treatment. So I think that's it. I have covered almost everything. if possible, go and read today so that it will register in your minds because you saw the pictures. Okay. Next, we'll see you in the next class. Thank you. You can give your attendance and leave.